Hello and welcome back then to RWR Plays TEW 2020. This is chapter 7 now of the series, and we are of course playing as Eric Bischoff as he leads and books WCW after Fusient Media Ventures bought the company in 2001. We've been playing from the beginning of May 2001. You can see we've already done 5 shows, including 4 episodes of Nitro and of course the Big Bang pay-per-view. We've got 2 weeks now until the Great American Bash, including today's episode. But first of all, a little recap of what took place on the previous show. And certainly the previous show was all about the two teams that are heading for one another at WarGames, building their armies. So now we do know that the main event is going to be Scott Steiner, Rick Flair and Jeff Jarrett versus Booker T, Sting, Stevie Ray and Kurt Hennig in a WarGames match at the Great American Bash. Also on last week's show, the Insiders defeated Team Canada when Kevin Nash defeated Mike Awesome. We also had Ric Flair claiming that Booker T needed to defend the WCW title every single month, and if he's facing them at the Great American Bash, that means he's unable to defend the belt at the Great American Bash, so he's asking when will Booker T defend that title. We saw Bill Goldberg get some partners of his own as he goes up against the franchise players Shane Douglas and Chronic. He roped Air Raid into joining him in a 6-man tag match at the pay-per-view when they came back from a victory during one of his interviews. And we also had Tommy Dreamer and Kanyon agree to face each other this week on Monday Nitro. So lots of stuff going on. Lots of stuff to get our teeth into. The stories are starting to pick up a little bit as we head right into the Great American Bash. So without further ado, let's go into the latest episode of Nitro. Okay, so the show begins with a couple of dark matches as per usual. This week we're in the Spartanburg Memorial Auditorium in South Carolina in front of 3,000 fans. So we are in the Mid-Atlantic region this week. We thought it was about time we went out of our Southwest base and began to run some shows elsewhere. The first match of the card was Team Canada and James Storm and Chris Harris against Alex Wright, Bobby Eaton, Billy Kidman and Rey Mysterio Jr., which was won by the heels when Michaelson pinned Bobby Eaton in 9:33. A segment rating of 58 here. And yeah, just some good performances. Really just to get everyone some ring time as none of these guys are featured on the main show this week. And then also Bill Goldberg in a pre-show match, just beating up on Johnny Swinger, a segment rating of 56. Goldberg an 81 in terms of his in-ring performance. He continues to shine, and that was really just to reward the 3,000 hardy souls who came to watch us for this episode of Nitro. So into the show proper. So to start the show, Mike Tenay and Jerry Lawler are talking to the camera and they hype the Great American Bash, which is just 2 weeks away, and they talk about the match card, which includes a WarGames contest between Scott Steiner, Rick Flair and Jeff Jarrett against Booker T, Sting, Stevie Ray and Kurt Hennig. They also say that there's a tag team title match already set up as Totally Buff defend the championships against the previous champions Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo, and that Bill Goldberg and Air Raid will be teaming up against the franchise players in a 6-man tag match. They are then interrupted by the Steiner brothers, and Scott grabs a microphone and says it was touching to see Harlem Heat's reunion last week on the show. He says it made him feel nostalgic. He says he wants to keep the nostalgia going tonight. He then challenges Harlem Heat to face the Steiner brothers for old times' sake. As the Steiner brothers walk away from the commentary booth, Mike Tenay comments that he doesn't know whether or not there is time in tonight's schedule for such a match, but that they would try and get Harlem Heat's response to the challenge as soon as they possibly could. A segment rating here of 63. Decent start to the show with the Steiner brothers interrupting the commentators at the broadcast booth. Next up, Adriel Orsini and Cara Slice have a match which gets a segment rating of 1. So this is the latest in the women's title round robin. Not really sure why a 1. I may have to look through the dirt sheet notes here. I think possibly just because neither are that skilled or popular. But saying that, Orsini had a performance of 21, Cara Slice 11. So I'm not entirely sure why that is. Maybe that's because because they're both heels or both baby faces. Obviously that's going to be a factor in this round robin. Anyway, no big deal. Just introducing all of these females at the moment to the crowd with these matches, these short matches. Cara Slice gets a victory here by submission. Then we get Tony Schiavone catching up with Harlem Heat backstage, and he asks them whether they accept the challenge of the Steiner brothers. Booker T says that the Steiners know that Stevie has an injured back, and all they're trying to do here is to put him out before WarGames. Stevie, however, says that bad back, nothing. If the Steiners want a war tonight, let's give them one. The brothers then bump fists, and it appears Harlem Heat have accepted the match. Schiavone, though, comments after they leave that still there's no word on whether or not there is time in tonight's schedule to accommodate such a tag team contest. Segment rating of 57. Tony Schiavone worked well. Booker T was superb. Stevie Ray struggled when going off script. But there we go. Segment rating of 57 is not too bad at all. Next up, we get the final of the Cruiserweight Tag Team Title #1 Contender Tournament. And it's 3 count against Air Raid, and 3 count get the victory when Shannon Moore pins Air Paris with a countdown. During the match, however, Brian Clark and Brian Adams ran in and attacked AJ Styles to help the team of 3 count win the match. Segment rating here of 41. Shannon Moore and Evan Courageous look pretty good. AJ Styles not looking too bad now. We're starting to build him, but Air Paris is falling behind a little bit. And Shannon Moore and Air Paris were off their game as well, so this could have been an even better match. Apparently the match was poorly placed because a high spot based match really needs a crowd who are buzzing and ready for action. I would have thought they would be ready for action after all the sort of fast paced start we've had, but there we go. Segment rating of 41, not bad at all. 3 count then win the tournament, and they will face Rey Mysterio Jr. and Billy Kidman at the Great American Bash for the Cruiserweight Tag Team titles. Next, we get a segment where Tony Schiavone is shown entering Eric Bischoff's office, where he is sat behind a desk busily making notes. Tony Schiavone asks Bischoff whether he's in a position to confirm that we have time for a Steiners Harlem Heat match tonight. Bischoff says that he thinks he has made some room in the schedule for them at the end of the show. He says he's had to move a match between Lex Luger and Chuck Palumbo to next week in order to do it, but he thinks they now have the time. Schiavone then also asked Bischoff if he is the response that was promised to Flair's assertion that Booker T next needs to defend the WCW title either tonight, next week on Nitro, or at the Great American Bash. Bischoff responds that Flair is indeed correct. He says it was an oversight from the Championship Committee. He says that they've been busy with the relaunch of WCW and things have just fallen through the net a little bit. He just didn't catch it. He says they have agreed that Booker must defend the title next week on Nitro, but they've decided to let Ric Flair himself choose Booker's opponent, with one caveat. He says it cannot be Scott Steiner who is selected. Tony Schiavone, then surprised, asks what happens if that person is successful, and what happens to the WarGames match due to take place at the Great American Bash. Bischoff says that the WarGames match will go ahead no matter what at the Great American Bash, but he says that it may be that the stipulation of the match will have to be renegotiated should Booker lose the title next week on Nitro. So the segment rating of 51 here, perhaps a little bit over convoluted, I'm not sure, but the idea was here to get over the fact that, you know, I didn't want to just be able to slot in a main event tag team match at the end of the show when that wouldn't have made sense before the show started. Like, surely the company would already have legislated for filling that time without this impromptu match taking place. So we then had to kind of explain how they made time for it. That was just something I wanted to sort of put in place, because I don't want to get in the habit of having impromptu matches all the time. And of course now we've also got the decision made that Booker T will defend the title on Nitro next week against somebody of Ric Flair's choice. Then we get Kurt Hennig versus Road Warrior Animal in a match. Ric Flair here tries to get involved, but when he gets up on the apron to hit Kurt Hennig, Hennig throws Animal into him and then rolls up Animal to get the victory. It's a rating of 57 here. Kurt Hennig 61, Road Warrior Animal 49. This is just obviously to continue Kurt Hennig's sort of journey towards the Great American Bash WarGames match and his feud with Ric Flair. There we get Tony Schiavone backstage with Kevin Nash in another arranged interview. And Schiavone announces that another match has been made for the Great American Bash, and it will see Kevin Nash challenge Mike Awesome for the United States title following Nash's pin on Awesome in tag action last week. Nash then joins for that interview where he says he didn't return to WCW to mess around, he's here for gold, and at the Great American Bash he's going to begin his collection with the US title. Segment rating of 55, Kevin Nash looks good, and we've now announced another match for the Great American Bash. This time, Kevin Nash will challenge Mike Awesome for the US title. Next up, we have a decent match between Great Sasuke and Chavo Guerrero Jr. The match ends in 11:31 by pinfall when Great Sasuke pins Chavo with a quick roll-up. Segment rating of 52, Chavo Guerrero in-ring performance of 49, Great Sasuke 49. This was pretty decent. 44, sorry. This was pretty decent, as Chavo and Great Sasuke have a match against one another. Afterwards, Chavo Guerrero attacks Great Sasuke, frustrated by his loss, but Shane Helms runs in to make the save. Segment rating here of 33, not a great segment. Announcing quality was good, but the rest of it wasn't so great. But nevertheless, Shane Helms and Chavo's story continues in terms of the Cruiserweight title. Next up, we have Vampiro versus Kaz Hayashi, and Hugh Morris is at ringside for this particular match. He's on commentary, and he's reminded by the announcers that should he get in any way physically involved in the match, he'd be suspended from WCW, which is a new stipulation of anybody who wishes to join the commentary team for any match. During the match, Vampiro points to Hugh Morris as if his control of the match is an example of what will happen to Morris at the Great American Bash, and Vampiro beats Kaz Hayashi in 6 minutes and 38 seconds. Segment rating 55. Vampiro looks really good with a 56. Hayashi still looking good too. The Vampiro Hugh Morris storyline has advanced and gained heat with this segment. After the contest, Vampiro runs his thumb across his throat to Morris. The commentators meanwhile remind Morris that he cannot get involved physically in any way or he'll be suspended, and the show goes to break. When we come back from the break, we've got Tony Schiavone backstage with Totally Buff in an interview, and he asks them about their rematch coming up at the Great American Bash against Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo. Lex Luger and Bagwell are dismissive of their opponents, and Bagwell asks why they need to beat up on those two chumps again. They already did it at the Big Bang. Segment rating here of 55, and Bagwell and Luger both perform pretty well, so they continue to do pretty well for us too. Then we get the hyped match between Tommy Dreamer and Kanyon, a match that went 10 minutes and 40 seconds and was run by Tommy Dreamer by pinfall. Dreamer a performance of 48, but Kanyon a 64, making this a very good segment rating of 65. Very decent match between the two. Dreamer and Kanyon, you can see there, have good chemistry, and that's a really big bonus to the feud that they've got going on at the moment. Yeah, really nice. This was obviously the match that was set up on the previous week's show. Another backstage segment happens next. Tony Schiavone arrives at the Magnificent Seven locker room where all the members are arguing about who should face Booker T next week. Tony Schiavone interrupts and asks Flair if a decision has been made. He says that he knows that Eric Bischoff gave him this choice to try to drive a wedge between them all, but it won't work. And Flair says that the only fair way to make this decision is for everybody to draw straws, with whoever gets the longest straw facing Booker T next week. Each of the Magnificent Seven then draw straws one by one from Flair's hand, and each picks out a small straw, leaving Flair with just one straw for himself, which he then opens his hand and reveals to be the long one. Flair begins to woo and get himself excited for the match next week, while the rest of the Magnificent Seven look on cynically about what just took place. So segment rating of 63 here. Ric Flair came out of this looking excellent. Tony Schiavone underwhelming. Even Road Warrior Animal seemed to perform pretty well here, and Jeff Jarrett was pretty good as well. Yeah, happy with that segment, and now that means that we know what the main event of next week's Nitro is. It will be Booker T defending the WCW title against Ric Flair 6 days out from WarGames at the Great American Bash. Which leads us to the main event, the Steiner Brothers versus Harlem Heat. In an exceptional match, Harlem Heat defeat the Steiner Brothers in 19 minutes and 14 seconds when Booker T pins Rick Steiner. In terms of in-ring work, Scott Steiner was head and shoulders above everyone else, and Stevie Ray was the undeniable weak link, struggling to keep up with everyone else's in-ring performance. During the match, the Steiners focused their attack on Stevie Ray's back, but it didn't make the difference that they hoped it would, and the Harlem Heat get the victory. So yeah, Scott Steiner there, an individual rating of 86. Booker T and Steiner about the same, and Stevie Ray down in 42. Segment rating of 77, very, very decent, and that is a great way to finish Monday Nitro, with Harlem Heat celebrating as the show goes off the air. And so that is Monday Nitro, 2 weeks out from the Great American Bash, and things are becoming both more clear and more blurry. You can see there we've got a popularity increase in 24 regions, then plus some additional boosts in popularity in Canada and Japan. An overall rating of 69, so another successful show for us. The main event, of course, the Harlem Heat defeating Steiner Brothers, a rating of 77. Next week, of course, we now know that it's going to be Ric Flair versus challenging Booker T for the World Heavyweight Championship. And that's the show. I said a pretty decent one. I'm pretty happy with all that's taken place. And we've set up plenty of stuff for both Great American Bash and Monday Nitro next week. One thing I'm interested in here, new match of the year, apparently, question mark, Steve Austin versus Chris Jericho. So that's what they put. Yeah, and it did 100 ratings. Steve Austin against Chris Jericho for the World Heavyweight title. So that's a massive episode of Raw that we were up against this week. Still, our show was still considered awesome. So I think what we're doing is we're consolidating what we've got. We are putting on decent shows. We're not going to compete with WWE. We know that. So we're not really concerned with that. We're just trying to put on our good shows good enough to continue to increase our own popularity. And as I said, Great American Bash now really taking shape. We've got the main event, the WarGames match set up. We've got the 6-man tag match with Goldberg and Air Raid against the franchise players. We've got the tag team title match set up. We've got a Cruiserweight Tag Team Title match set up. We have got the US title match set up as Mike Awesome will face Kevin Nash, and there will be more matches yet to be announced for the show at the Great American Bash, which is now not very far away at all. In terms of this episode, that is everything. If you have enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and subscribe if you want to continue to follow along. Until next time, thank you for watching.